nuclear plant. The referendum needed 25% of eligible voters to vote, but it fell short by about 3%. The referendum is backed by two opposition parties. They say Taiwan needs to cut its reliance on imported power, as almost all of Taiwan's energy comes from imports. This is sparking concerns that China could use this vulnerability to attack the island. But the ruling party argues bringing back nuclear power poses safety concerns. Coming up, a South Korean delegation visits China, calling for normalization of ties between the two ahead of... A U.S. Navy sailor has been convicted of espionage for selling military... Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, Taiwan is raising its military budget to over 3% of GDP, with officials already eyeing an even bigger jump in the years ahead. The move follows Trump's call for stronger alliances and deterrence. Members of the free world responding to President Trump's deterrence call across the Indo-Pacific. Key allies and partners are boosting their defense budgets. We break it down. How close are we to a war over Taiwan? We spoke with an expert who explains why the West may need to prepare.
I think it's time that allies really kind of make it explicit what they're aiming for. If we have to go to war, if China does provoke a war.
And the Philippines and Australia joining forces in a new defense pact. The deal boosts military cooperation between the two key U.S. allies and counters growing threats from Communist China. As aggressions from the Chinese Communist Party grow, U.S. allies and strategic partners in the Asia-Pacific are answering the call of President Trump's peace through strength. Here's a look at the latest defense updates from these key partners. Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te is calling for defense spending to reach 5% of the island's GDP over the next 5 years. He made the remarks after the government set next year's defense budget at just over 3% of GDP. But with Lai's term ending in 2028, it's unclear whether Taiwan will actually reach the 5% target. Heading north to Japan, a recent think tank reports says Tokyo's military spending jumped 21% last year. The report also found Japan scrambled fighter jets against Chinese aircraft 465 times between last April and this March. That's on top of other airspace and maritime intrusions by China. Turning to Southeast Asia, the Philippines is also boosting defense cooperation with the U.S. Earlier this year, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth pledged $500 million in aid to help the ally modernize its military. He also promised advanced defense training, new equipment, and a cyber program. Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines all sit along the first island chain, a string of islands that blocks China's Navy from entering the deep Pacific. It's widely seen as a key barrier preventing Chinese forces from threatening the U.S. mainland. Moving west to the Korean Peninsula, South Korea's foreign minister on Monday signaled openness to Washington's call for higher defense spending ahead of the president's visit to the White House next week. And down in the Pacific, another U.S. ally, New Zealand, announced plans to buy 5 maritime helicopters and 2 Airbus jets from the U.S. The Trump administration's foreign policy is realigning U.S. alliances across Europe and the Indo-Pacific to counter growing threats from China. NTD's Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has more.
Just look at what took place during the last 4 administrations.
Pacific are getting more and more Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific. It's also important to note that China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and India all spend more than any other U.S., NATO, or Indo-Pacific ally on military and defense. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Could China be moving toward an invasion of Taiwan? As tensions rise in the Taiwan Strait, one expert explains why the West needs to prepare for exactly that possibility. To dive deeper, we spoke with Pascal, senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. President Trump said recently that China's Xi Jinping promised him that China would not invade Taiwan while Trump was president. Now, given Communist Chinese leaders' history of not saying publicly what they actually mean, how should we read this? Because so far the Chinese side hasn't refuted this. Is this, an actual guarantee, or is this like something that led up to World War II?
Well, they also said they wouldn't use the Scarborough Shoal or any of the South China Sea. Take it for what you will. And I think that President Trump also is taking it, with not just a grain, but maybe an entire ocean full of salt.
We do see on Taiwan's side, however, that they are saying Taiwan has to rely on itself for its own defense. It's trying to buy about 50,000 more in terms of drones and arms from the U.S., actually. But I know in terms of history, right, recent history in terms of the Ukraine war, it was when Ukraine said they wanted to defend themselves that other countries started coming in. So perhaps laying that groundwork. But lots to see. With all the areas covered today, though, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
This is a time for understanding who has the same values you have and who wants to see a world that is similar to your ultimate goals. So we had before the U.S. entered World War II, the U.S. president and the prime minister of the UK got together and wrote the Atlantic Charter, which was the vision for, and included getting rid of Nazi tyranny, for example. And I think it's time that allies really kind of make it explicit what they're aiming for. If we have to go to war, if China does provoke a war, what are we fighting for? And where are we trying to head? And I think that will make it much more clear among allies who actually your allies are, who's willing to fight for the same things you're fighting for, so that these disagreements over things that may seem transitory, but if you don't handle them properly, can actually create fractures with your core allies and friends. Gets mediated as quickly as possible.
Cleo, Pascal, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang is in Taiwan on Friday for a visit to the world's largest chip manufacturer, TSMC. This is the company that makes chips for Nvidia, as well as other companies such as Apple and AMD. Huang says Nvidia is waiting on Chinese demand before making more H20 chips. Here's more about his trip.
Nvidia boss Jensen Huang arrived in Taiwan on Friday.
My main purpose is to visit TSMC.
That makes it a meeting of the world's most valuable firm and the world's biggest contract chip maker. TSMC said Huang would give a speech to staff without offering many further details. The visit comes after Donald Trump indicated earlier this month that Nvidia might be allowed to sell more advanced AI chips to China. Reuters sources said this week that the company is working on a new semiconductor dubbed the B30A. That could replace or complement the H20, the most advanced chip it's currently allowed to sell in China. Asked about the B30A, Huang would only say that it was up to the U.S. government what products it would be allowed to sell to Beijing.
Offering a new product to China for the data center, AI data centers, the follow-on to H20, that's not our decision to make. It's up to, of course, the United States government. And we're in dialogue with them, but it's too soon to know.
For now, he said he was trying to assess demand for the current chip.
We've prepared a lot of H20 already, but now we are waiting for purchase orders from China customers. And so when we receive the orders, we will be able to produce more.
Nvidia only got permission to resume sales of the H20 to China in July. Washington had imposed export curbs in 2023, concerned over the supply of cutting-edge AI tech to the country. Shortly after the July green light, Nvidia ordered 300,000 H20s from TSMC to add to its existing inventory. However, days later, China's cyberspace regulator and state media warned against the company's chips, saying they could pose security risks.
Chevy is called the heartbeat of America. Like the people who keep this country moving. For them, only America's most dependable truck will do. In every Chevy truck, dependability comes standard.
那现在看起来，俄乌之战争呢，俄国大概是贪婪先发作呢。他只要美国不真的大力介入的话呢，他可能会继续打下去。所以就要看美国要不要出大招。美国目前出的第一招就是同意或至少放话呢，让乌克兰直接去打俄罗斯。 那如果再不行的话，那就看美国愿不愿意直接派军队。如果美国直接，当然现在还是不愿意了哈。如果美国直接派军队的话，那俄国就一定会收手了。所以现在就是卡在这地方。那对于欧洲来说呢，他能做的事情比较少，除了现在我不断增加军费然后增加我的军工产能之外，他能做的事情比较少。对于中共来说呢，我们刚刚这样盘点下来，他的这情况呢是越来越困难，因为他机会之窗呢一扇扇关上，不但机会之窗关上，现在呢对他来说，美国的力量从各方面在逼近，他现在穷于应付，所以他现在在挣扎当中，虽然他想出很多回应的办法。对台湾来说呢，这是一个千载难逢的机会，我们要善用我们的实力跟我们的条件，对美国跟对欧洲呢好好谈判，争取商机，争取安全保障，然后争取建设一个反共破共的大同盟。现在呢是时机了，所以大家慢慢看懂了，如果中共瓦解的话，国际上问题少掉一大半，那现在就是你愿不愿意下这个决心，现在该是我们提醒大家来下这个决心的时候了。